Hi, my name is Amber Anderson, and this is my Intro to Human Services Chapter 2 assignment video. For my video, the occupation that I picked was a drug abuse counselor. So this profession is becoming very popular to go into due to the fact that drug addiction is becoming so prevalent. There are over 230 million drug users worldwide of illicit drugs. Every year, drug and alcohol abuse in the United States comes with a $600 billion price tag. Every single day, about 50 Americans die from a prescription drug overdose, and an estimated 52 million Americans use prescription drugs for non-medical reasons at least once in their lifetime, which is huge. 52 million Americans is quite a bit. Deaths from drug abuse has doubled in the last decade and has just continued to be on the rise. Prescription drug abuse kills more people annually than car accidents. The CDC has classified prescription drug abuse as an epidemic now. Okay, so what is the definition of a drug abuse counselor? What exactly do they do? A substance abuse counselor advises people dealing with alcoholism or other types of addictions to drugs such as intoxicants or painkillers. The job of a counselor in this field is to evaluate the client's mental and physical health, addictive behaviors, and openness to treatment. On completing an evaluation of the client, the counselor helps his client develop a treatment and recovery plan, as well as identifying behaviors that interfere with both processes and addressing those, helping them through them. They also then review and recommend treatment options to families and help them develop strategies to deal with the client's addictions and the problems that come with them. Drug abuse counselors must all have a fundamental belief that addiction is a disease and that it is highly treatable if given the appropriate treatments, interventions, and time. To believe that it's a disease gives them the ability to know that there is treatment plans for it and there's hope for their client. The treatment plan the counselor helps set into place can take on a number of different forms. There is group therapy, which is working in a group with other people going through similar problems and addictions. This often helps as therapy for the people to have other people to relate to talk to help through what they're going through. The counselor often acts as the facilitator in these groups to lead the group therapy in a positive direction towards healing. Another form of therapy that usually goes hand in hand with group therapy is individual therapy. That's where the counselor helps the client try to get to the root cause of their problem and work at addressing that as well as potential triggers to their addiction. This also helps the client to start to mend broken relationships and situations caused from their addiction. Another form of therapy offered, usually I would say most counselors would do all three of these at some point. The third one would be therapy classes. Drug abuse counselors often teach classes on addiction. This helps with skill building with the client and decision making. Oftentimes when a client starts using drugs, your brain actually stops developing, they say, around the age that you started having an addiction. So a lot of times people that have been using drugs for many, many years need help with everyday skills and skill building and decision making to make right choices in the future. You almost have to relearn some of those fundamental behaviors that we learned growing up. They also sometimes teach classes with the addict's family members to learn exactly what is happening in the addict's brain and to help them get a better understanding of how and why the addict may do what they do and act the way they act. I think it's kind of the sense of almost like Al-Anon and those kind of groups to give the family some support, but also to educate them on addiction itself and the fact that it is truly a disease and there's treatment for it. Some challenges that are faced by a drug abuse counselor. A major challenge facing the counselor would be the growing gap between the number of clients that require specialized treatment and those that actually end up getting it. In 2010, about 23.1 million Americans ages 12 and older, which ends up being 9.1% of the nation's population, required specialized treatment. However, only 2.6 million were in a treatment program, according to a project conducted by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So definitely a big gap there. Schooling and licensing for a substance abuse counselor. Each state has different requirements to acquire different credentials. Most states, however, use the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium, or IC&RC, which is much easier to say, and the NAADAC, which is the Association for Addiction Professionals. Substance abuse counselors typically must have a master's degree in psychology, counseling, social work, or a closely related field. I believe you can have a bachelor's degree, but it's highly beneficial to have a master's degree. It proves to be very advantageous as well to pursue a PhD and work in either a clinical setting or a private practice. The programs in substance abuse treatment for that degree are plentiful and only take about 5 years to finish. Some career statistics for this profession. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average annual salary for a substance abuse counselor is about $41,870 a year. The pay seems to be highest for counselors who work in hospitals and those that pursue higher degrees of education. I also found that workers that work for the state or the government in any way tend to make the most. The lowest paying working environment tends to be in residential facilities. The growing population of such programs is one reason that the Bureau forecasts a 27% growth in job opportunities between 2010 and 2020. So it's a highly growing job. As more people seek treatment, the need for additional supportive services such as work in detox centers and halfway houses will also continue to rise. So there's always going to be this demand for this type of field work. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 94,900 jobs in 2014. And here I just included this graph that kind of shows from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics where each job in the industry would fall as far as pay goes for a salary annually. So you can kind of see that the state, local, and private hospitals and government are definitely on the higher paying end, as well as individual family services is also right up there. But your lowest paying jobs would be in a residential facility. So there are many skills that are needed to be a good substance abuse counselor. Being empathetic or trying to put yourself in your client's shoes and showing a true caring of the client is essential in being a good counselor. I think a little empathy goes a long way with people, and when they're going through something as trying as an addiction, it can be really reassuring for them to know that the person that they're confiding in is actually someone that cares and that is trying to understand how they truly feel. Also, although it's obviously not a requirement, a lot of very passionate drug counselors have suffered from past addictions themselves or from having friends or family members that have struggled with it. That kind of gives people, I think, that passion and drive if they've been through something like that, whether directly or through a family member, kind of gives you that passion and drive to want to help other people through it. Also, successful drug counselors should proceed in each new session with patience, understanding, and a commitment to help that client reach sobriety. You need to be an open-minded, honest, and trustworthy person. Every person is different and comes with from different backgrounds than our own, all of which act as building blocks into who we are as a person and contribute to what makes us think and act the way we do. Understanding or trying to the best of our ability and having an open mind can all help us to gain trust and work to the root of the person's problem. I think that kind of comes back to the empathy thing again. If we're being empathetic to the person and gaining their trust and being open-minded to their story, I think that goes a long way, and people are more willing to open up to you, which in turn helps you learn more about them and become the best counselor that you can be for them. Some more skills needed to be a good counselor. The process of going through withdrawal from any drug and being in the recovery stage is not easy for a client as it is. So I think being a good listener, a good communicator, and understanding that recovery does not happen overnight is pretty critical to being a successful counselor. Feeling genuine compassion and not being overly critical of your client also builds on the relationship between the two of you. A passionate and successful counselor works closely with the client's family, friends, and other loved ones to ensure not only a network of support for the client in their recovery, but also to help mend those relationships that may have been strained or damaged in the past from the addiction. Educating those loved ones on addiction also helps so that family and friends work on understanding what all comes into play with someone's addiction and their behavior that also accompanies it. I think that also comes back to where I talked about therapy classes being something that counselors offer to the family, and that all kind of goes hand in hand. And some more skills that I think would make a good drug counselor would include being aware of the different processes of the disease of addiction. That just comes into really understanding the disease itself and having that knowledge of it. Being attentive to detail and being able to assess the clients who may not be forthcoming with all information. I think a lot of times, especially in the beginning, while gaining that trust, you're going to get clients who are not always telling the truth or maybe apprehensive to kind of tell the whole story. Being attentive to detail to all of that and kind of knowing what to look for and how to dig a little deeper while gaining their trust is all pretty critical to be a good counselor. Having good organizational skills is necessary, as a lot of times you are responsible for organizing your own caseload and patient record keeping. And also having a good demeanor when handling different kinds of crisis situations, such as knowing a general suicide prevention plan. And lastly, I think a good skill of a counselor would be being able to explain the realities of drug addiction to the families, and explaining the need for accountability, support, and communication is extremely important. Being a good communicator in this particular area is also important because a family member or friend could also be part of the client's initial problem. So there are many reasons that I believe are reasons to enter the addictions field. Some of those would be the fact that it's rewarding. While at times it can be a stressful and tough job, the benefits of seeing someone who is at their lowest low start to stand on their own 2 feet and use the coping mechanisms that you've taught them is most rewarding. I think that's probably, I would imagine, one of the best feelings about being in this profession. And likewise, it could go the other way too, where it could be tough seeing people struggle and not succeed. But I think this has to be a super rewarding job. Another reason would be personal growth. Helping clients make positive changes in their own life also helps us to reflect on ourselves. There's also growth opportunities with addiction treatment being relatively new in comparison to other professions. There's an ever-evolving list of credentials becoming available. There are different levels of addiction counselors, such as counselors specializing in addiction field gambling, all sorts of different spin-offs of the job. There's also, unfortunately, job security with addiction becoming more of an epidemic. Unfortunately, this job field will not be going anywhere. The Bureau of Labor says that the number of substance abuse and behavioral counselor jobs will grow by 27% between 2010 and 2020. So on the other end of things, there are some disadvantages of being a drug counselor. That would be, depending on the particular setting in which you work, you may be required to work some evenings, weekends, or holidays. This field could be especially draining in the fact that we cannot help everyone. It could be particularly hard to watch someone relapse and not make the necessary changes in their life. Seeing the addiction take a toll on the person as well as the strain it causes in their families could be emotionally taxing. Trying to not be so hard on ourselves when we see a client slip up and not do well is necessary to do and remember with this profession. Otherwise, it would be very easy for someone to get burnout with their job. And from what I've read, I think that happens quite often. Unfortunately, you can't control everybody, and I suppose after a while it would be kind of hard seeing somebody that you've grown close to through talking to them and getting to know them, and that you just can't change everybody and not everybody is going to succeed. That's got to be kind of a hard part of the job. Overall, though, from what I learned, I think that being a drug counselor has got to be one of the most rewarding human services jobs that I could think of. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thanks.